the White House just confident that there's not going to be a second wave of the coronavirus?
The White House is confident that we have enough testing to identify asymptomatic individuals, that we have therapeutics that are promising, that we are working on a vaccine with Project Warp Speed that we hope will be there by the end of the year and we think will be, and we have a robust public-private partnership that has shored up America's supply chain. So we are in a good place, and that's what the Vice President was noting. John.
Thanks a lot, Kayleigh. Two subjects. The first question has to do with the lawsuit that was filed against John Bolton, the former National Security Advisor, by the Department of Justice yesterday. The DOJ did not file a lawsuit against Simon & Schuster, nor did it file an injunction against the publisher. Why not? Do you still expect this book to hit bookstores, to be on Amazon, to be available for people to read on the 23rd of this month?
So that, as to why they went down that particular path, that's a question for DOJ. But what I would note is this book is full of classified information, which is inexcusable. Former National Security Advisor John Bolton should know all too well that it's unacceptable to have highly classified information from the government of the United States in a book that will be published. It's unacceptable. It has not gone through the review process, and that's where we currently stand. And I'd refer you back to Barr's comment on this, which is we don't believe that Bolton went through that process. It hasn't been completed, the process, and therefore he is in violation of that agreement. That was part of his quote from Monday.
Then on the other subject, the executive order the president signed yesterday, during that event, in his comments, he acknowledged that there are indeed bad police officers. Is the president opposed to the idea of removing qualified immunity for police officers, even bad police officers?
Yeah, so qualified immunity, let me note, is a total and complete non-starter. What qualified immunity would do is it would really enable the police in this country to do their job. That's in the Democrat bill, and I'd argue this, Democrats, they say defund the police, defund the, we hear that from Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez and Congresswoman Omar and others. Well, what does the Democrat bill do? By removing qualified immunity, what you're essentially doing is not allowing police to do their job. There would be a decrease in policing in this country. Our streets would not be safe. What President Trump has done is worked with law enforcement to improve law enforcement, to ensure that the bad cops that exist are pushed out of the system. The overwhelming majority of cops are good, so we've got to address the handful that are bad, and that's what the president's order has done. But taking away qualified immunity would make the streets of this country a whole lot less secure. Just look at what happened when we didn't have ample law enforcement out on Lafayette Square. A church burned and multiple officers injured.
So how do you handle a situation, Kayleigh, of a bad police officer hiding behind the shield of qualified immunity?
Look, I would note that also the court has litigated this pretty strongly. It's been adjudicated. The Harlow court, in that decision, Harlow, the Supreme Court, talked about achieving a balance between allowing victims to hold officials accountable while also minimizing the social cost to the whole, the cost of police officers, for example, pulling back. So the Supreme Court has litigated this for decades and has approached what they think is the appropriate balance with qualified immunity. And I think it would go a long way just doing what the president did yesterday, having that national database of offenders so we ensure that a police officer doesn't leave one department and then go to another. Francesca.
Thank you, Kayleigh. You outlined the White House's position on qualified immunity, defunding the police, but you also said earlier that the Democratic bill is full of bad ideas. What are the other quote-unquote bad ideas besides those two that the president would not sign a policing bill if they wound up in the final version?
So one of the things the bill does is it undermines due process. The Democrat bill would undermine the due process rights of every officer by making pending and unsubstantial allegations available to the public, causing reputational damage based on allegations alone. That's a really good example, because what our database does is once a claim has been adjudicated, we know something was done wrong, it goes into a database that remains private. It protects the privacy of the officers, but it is utilized to ensure that officer does not get to go to another department. What the Democrat bill would do is someone submits an allegation, well, we're going to violate the due process rights of this officer and put it into a system. We have to balance everything in this situation, making sure our good, hardworking, overwhelmingly good police officers are able to do their job, but ensuring that we do not have victims like the victims I heard about yesterday and the excruciating, painful, devastating stories of their sisters, of their mothers, and of their fathers.
So, sorry, one other question on that and something else. So you're saying those are the three? That's it?
There's a number of things, but those are the ones that I've listed out so far.
Okay,
but there's a number of problems.
And on the president's rallies, he has also said that he has rallies on the books in North Carolina and also Florida, two states that have seen recent spikes in coronavirus. Who told the president that it would be safe to have rallies in states that are seeing spikes right now?
We're confident that there are embers out there that exist that will be able to put out those embers. Florida has a great governor. He's done a great job so far. We work closely with Governor DeSantis, and we believe that we will be at a safe place. Yes.
Kayleigh, Justice Gorsuch's decision from the Supreme Court this week against anti-LGBT discrimination was focused on employment civil rights law, but also had implications on housing, health care. How does the president want to see this implemented? Does he want it implemented as extensively or as narrowly as possible?
So what the president says is he's read the decision, they've ruled, we live with the decision, and we live with the decision of the Supreme Court. So that's where he stands currently. And in terms of how it's implemented, DOJ will lead the multi-agency effort to help provide certainty to the regulated parties.
I understand DOJ's role, but the president also has the opportunity to express his opinion and to lead, much like President Obama in 2013 said he hoped the marriage decision from the Supreme Court would be implemented as extensively as possible. What is President Trump's view on the appropriate scope of Gorsuch's decision?
So DOJ will be guiding that entirely, so I will leave that to DOJ.
And finally, has the president have any conversations with the DOJ about the implementation of the Gorsuch decision?
Not that I'm aware of. He might have had one I don't know about, but not that I'm aware of.
One more question. Does the president think that the BLASTS decision is a win for civil rights?
Sorry?
Does the president think the Gorsuch decision is a win for civil rights?
So one thing I would say, I haven't not talked to the president about that personally, but one thing I wanted to read was from the Kavanaugh dissent. There were some real concerns that this was a complete distortion of how we do statutory interpretation, and Kavanaugh lays that out very nicely. But one thing Justice Kavanaugh did say, and I thought it was a very powerful quote, is notwithstanding my concern about the court's transgression of the Constitution's separation of powers, which was a grave concern as a separation of powers point that the DOJ argued in court, it is appropriate to acknowledge the important victory achieved today by gay and lesbian Americans. So I thought that was a very good quote from Justice Kavanaugh. Yes. Alexandra.
Thank you. On the plan to reduce U.S. troops in Germany, is there a timeline you can share with us? And could this plan be changed or softened if Berlin agreed to increase its defense spending?
So the president addressed our presence, American troop presence in Germany, and he said we're bringing that number down from 52,000, about what it's at now, to 25,000. And the rationale for that, he articulated, was that Germany is very delinquent in their payments to NATO. They're paying 1%. They're supposed to be at 2%, and even 2% is low. It should be much more than that. Michael.
Would he change his plan if Germany agreed to increase?
I wouldn't get ahead of the president on making that decision. Michael.
Hi, thanks, Kayleigh. I have one question, and then I have two quick questions from colleagues who have sent to me as the pool person. So on my question, back when two White House officials were tested positive for COVID, we all reported on an email that went out to West Wing employees instructing them that masks were mandatory to be worn in the West Wing at all times, with the exception of being when they were sitting at their desks alone. Obviously, none of the White House people that I've seen today have been wearing masks at all. Has that been rescinded? Has that instruction to West Wing employees been rescinded formally, or is it just still in place but nobody's paying attention to it? Or
masks are recommended but not required, excuse me, as I said.
Two quick questions.
I want to get to everyone in the room.
Well, these are from people who can't be in the room because of the restrictions. So
I understand, but I want to make sure I get to everyone in the room, and then we can come back.
Nope.
So, Rob.
Can I just get a clarification on your equivalence between protests in the streets and rallying on Saturday? Is it the White House position that outdoor events carry the same risk as indoor events?
It's our position that the media should not be making decisions about their guidelines to us about social distancing based on political ideology or what they think is the worthiness of the cause.
My point is there are good scientific reasons for treating the two events events differently? One is outdoors and one is indoors.
Right, and there's not good logical reason for this, so that's the one thing I would keep going back to.
And could I also ask,
yes, Owen.
Is anything about the Secretary of State's trip to Hawaii to meet his Chinese counterpart?
So I have no information on that. Owen. Yes.
Blake, different mask.
Oh, sorry, Blake. They subbed you in.
No worries, no worries.
Good to see you, Blake.
You too. A couple on the economic front. Earlier this month in Maine, the president was talking about Maine lobster, and he said the following. He said, if the European Union doesn't drop that tariff immediately, we're going to put a tariff on their cars, which will be equivalent. Can you give us an update on that? What is the status of potential tariffs on EU autos?
I haven't inquired about that today, but I will inquire about that, and I'll try to get back to you before 5 if that works.
And secondly, an infrastructure bill. Can you just sort of give us a broad outline of what the administration wants to see? Is that a reauthorization of the highway bill that comes up at the end of the year? Is that added on to a potential phase 4 stimulus? What does the White House want as it relates to
Yeah, I don't want to get ahead of the administration on our official plans for that. Infrastructure is something we've talked about for a long time, and it's something that we think that we could find common ground on, but it's up to Democrats to really come to us and make that happen. It's been mentioned as potentially a phase 4, but that's not in stone, but that has been mentioned. No formalized plans, though, on where infrastructure stands.
Is that $1 trillion? Is it $1 trillion?
We don't have a number on that right now. Yes.
On the Tulsa rally, can you give us a sense of which health experts the campaign and the White House consulted before deciding to hold it? Did anyone talk to the CDC about whether it would be a good idea?
Look, we are taking every single safety precaution that we can. And again, I would note this is probably question number 10 on rallies. And while we appreciate the great concern for our rally goers, you should exhibit that same concern for the protesters who are out there who are not socially distancing in many cases and not wearing masks. Chanel.
Thank you, Kayleigh. Going back to the international front on China and India, you just mentioned that the administration is monitoring the situation, but the president has mentioned that he would be willing to mediate the conflict between China and India now. If he were to do so, what does that look like? Does that look like a one-on-one conversation? Does that mean bringing the two leaders together? Has the president indicated what mediation looks like for China and India?
So again, no formal plans on that beyond what I already said, and expressing our absolute condolences to the Indian soldiers that died as a result of today's confrontation. We extend our deepest condolences there. And I would note just that during the phone call on June 2nd of this year that President Trump had with Prime Minister Modi, they did discuss the situation on the India-China border.
On the relationship between President Trump and President Xi, the Chinese forces have been moving thousands of troops to that region. That it doesn't seem like that region is going to see de-escalation anytime soon. If you were to characterize President Trump's relationship with President Xi today, would you venture into that realm?
I would just say what the president has said before, that he is really appalled at the fact that the coronavirus came out of China. They weren't allowing flights into China, but were allowing flights out. They slow-walked information. The WHO seemed to partner with China in slow-walking that information about asymptomatic spread. So that is an appalling. And the president is very upset by that action of China, or inaction in some cases, I should say. Thank you all very much. I hope you have a great rest of the day. And I hope we start seeing more consistent headlines. Thanks very much.
The Bolton lawsuit says. Why did it take 6 months?
Well, I'm glad we caught some of that briefing for everybody there. It looked like they were having those audio issues one more time near the end. You are watching it all on coronavirusnow.com and Fox live stream. Always here with you, bringing you the very latest from coast to coast. We appreciate all our viewers from all over the country.